Ayya
Morning.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good morning, Venerable, and good morning to all our friends online. Today we have Venerable Suvijjana, who's visiting from Dhammadharini Monastery, who she has spent there quite some past decade, right, or so. Great Bhikkhuni monastery in California. And hello to all our friends who are joining us today. Hello to Geeta, Ron, Michael, Abby, Melissa, Kumu, Jens, Kyle, and Elaine. Welcome to everyone. This is part of, it's our sutta study that is dedicated this week to the Therigatha festival, a wonderful project from Venerable Vimalanyani, and Bhante Akaliko, I believe, as well, is involved. And there is a link in the comments on therigathafestival.net where you can see the collection of talks and other sutta discussions that are shared by venerables worldwide, actually, on the subject matter. So lots of reasons to celebrate this week. And I'm also going to include in the comments, actually, at therigatha.org, which is a project, I believe, started by Ayya Suvijjana, and that has a compilation of a lot of different versions and translations of the verses of the elder bhikkhunis. But without further ado, I'll pass it on to Venerable Suvijjana, who will be talking this morning about Patacara's 30 students. So the Therigatha 5:11, the poem there. Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you. Thank Ayya Suvijjana for inviting me, and all those at Empty Cloud for hosting me here, Bhante Siddhasa. I chose these verses because it's actually a tribute, in a way, it's a tribute to Patacara. So I'm going to read actually her enlightenment verse as well as the verse about her 30 students. And then I'll do some comparison, actually some other verses too. But first we'll just start with the verses, the reading of the verses. Let's see. This is Patacara. It's a 5:10. Plowing the field with plows, sowing the seeds in the ground, nourishing wives and children, young Brahmin find wealth. Why do I, possessed of virtuous conduct, complying with the teachings of the teacher, not attain quenching? I am not slack, nor puffed up. Having washed my feet, I paid attention to the waters, and seeing the foot water come to the low land from the high land. Then I concentrated my mind like a noble thoroughbred horse. Then taking the lamp, I entered my cell. Having inspected the bed, I sat on the couch. Then taking a needle, I drew out the wick. The complete release of my mind was like the quenching of the lamp. So she realized Nibbana. She had complete liberation of mind. This is the 30 bhikkhunis. And this is Patacara speaking to her students. Having taken pestles, young Brahmins grind corn. Nourishing wives and children, young Brahmins find wealth. Do the Buddha's teaching, which having done, one does not repent. Quickly, having washed your feet, sits down on one side. Intent on peace of mind, do the Buddha's teaching. They, having heard her utterance, the teaching of Patacara, having washed their feet, sat down on one side. Intent on peace of mind, they did the Buddha's teaching. In the first watch of the night, they recollected they had been born before. In the middle watch of the night, they purified the divine eye. In the third watch of the night, they tore asunder the mass of darkness, of ignorance. Standing up, they paid homage to her feet. Your advice has been taken. We shall dwell honoring you, like the 30 Devas honoring Indra, who is unconquered in battle. We have the triple knowledge. We are without asavas. So they became Arahants. So it's really touching. When I first was reading through these verses, and a teacher will teach what they know, how they've experienced awakening, how they practice it. So this indicates to me that Patacara was doing this, that she was drawing from her own experience. It's plowing the field with plows and sowing the seeds in the ground. And it says, nourishing wives and children, young Brahmin find wealth. So in the notes here, this is a translation by K.R. Norman. And he was saying that it was an attack on Brahmanism. And somehow that doesn't make so much sense to me. Why she'd be contemplating this, and then she would also be saying something similar to her students. So in the suttas, the Buddha compares the cultivation of the mind to working the field, cultivating the field. So without looking at any notes, this is what came to me. I'm taking the liberty just to how it's touching my heart rather than some scholarly study of what, or understanding of how the Pali is grammatically presenting this. But I think with poetry, it's meant to speak to our hearts and our intuition, I think. So it does seem like a metaphor to me, rather than for some reason she's attacking the Brahmins. And also because her students had already left the household life behind, why would she be mentioning something similar again? So here, this is the preliminary work, the plowing the fields and sowing the seeds. And now the grain is harvested. So this is the way I'm taking it. Having taken pestles, young Brahmins grind corn. So this is like they've done the preliminary work, and now they're doing more refined work. Patacara sees the students' minds are ripe, they're ready. So they have some accomplishments. This is what I'm just surmising. This is just how I'm taking this intuitively. Having taken pestles, young Brahmins grind corn, nourishing wives and children. Young Brahmins find wealth. So what is the wealth? What is the wealth that the monastics are seeking? And what is, and also, this is showing, this is the actual work of the monastics, this cultivation of mind, this purification of mind. So when someone is grinding grain by hand, that's a lot. That's a lot of work, actually. If anyone's done that kind of, that's just refined work, really persistent work. So this is the work of anyone on the path. Just continuing refining and refining the mind. So here she says, do the Buddha's teaching, which having done, one does not regret. Quickly, having washed your feet, sit down on one side, intent on peace of mind, do the Buddha's teaching. So I was really touched too that, I mean, she had an initial insight when she was washing her feet. So it's an ordinary thing to do when someone is barefoot, to wash one's feet. And this is actually what one should do. As monastics, we're supposed to be washing our feet before entering and leaving the premises and all, but it's usually not mentioned. You know, this is kind of an ordinary thing. So the fact that she's mentioning this, bringing mindfulness to the activities of life and gaining insight through these activities. So having heard her utterance, the teaching of Patacara, having washed their feet, sat down on one side, intent on peace. They did the Buddha's teaching. So this, you can imagine 30 of these bhikkhunis sitting together. Maybe it was an Aposita night, an all-night sitting, which was customary. But the fact that they all attained awakening at once, this is a really remarkable thing too. You see in some of the suttas, actually the bhikkhus are described as sometimes sitting all together and attaining different meditative attainments simultaneously. So this is also not unheard of. It's not, you know, in the Buddha's teaching. And I think anyone who's sat, I mean, when you sit together in groups, you could get really a sense of other people's minds, or you might notice that some situations are more conducive. Some communities are more conducive. When you sit together, you get a sense of the other people's mind states. There's an influence. So I'm not the only one who's noticed this. So, and some people sitting with a teacher also can really help with elevation of the mind. But the influence, the group influence is certainly something that's recognized even in common day. So, but it's remarkable that together they made this accomplishment. I want to speak about another sutta here too that's extremely similar. It's Uttara, and it's just about the same thing. But Patachara's teaching is more specific. And this one, she just tells them to do the Buddha's teaching. And here, they're coming, she says, summoning up mind, intent on will and well concentrated. Consider the constituent elements as other and not self. So here I have I also have this translation by Mahindra Anagarika Mahindra, and this also has the Pali side by side. So for Uttara, she's telling her pretty much the same thing about holding pestles, people grind grains, nourishing sons and wives, people enjoy wealth. So here the translation is to contemplate formations as other than mine and not mine. And Pacheka Kata Sankhare, so it says to contemplate or to consider the Sankhara, so formations make sense, the mental formations or physical formations. Sometimes the body actually is called Sankhara, but it could be the four elements, but so she's getting more specific. This is showing that she's giving a specific teaching here. So I thought I would bring that up. So I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. I didn't bring a clock and I don't see a clock. Oh, here's
right
the
there.
clock.
There's still time. Yeah.
Okay. So, so I was inspired by these verses because there's so little about bhikkhunis as teachers, what they taught. You kind of have to piece things together from the Therigatha. There are some, there's the Samyutta, the Bhikkhuni Samyutta, but it's their encounters with Mara. So this shows a little bit more about an individual. There's like more in the Therigatha about Patacara. She's also, there's a Chanda. who was a poor beggar, and she was influenced by Patacara. And it says, and that same Patacara in pity sent me forth. So she was inspired by seeing Bhikkhuni. She was a poor beggar and she wasn't getting any food, and she was inspired that Patacara was receiving food and drink. But then Patacara exhorted her and urged her towards the highest goal, it says here. And the noble lady's exhortation was not in vain. I have the triple knowledge. I am without asavas. So this is another individual that was inspired by Patacara. And there's also a discussion about Patacara, whether that her origin story was actually Kita Goswami's story, and somehow the stories got confused. And whether that's true or not, I don't know. But she did also influence, there's a teaching here about the 500 students of Patacara. And these women were overcome, or at least some of them were overcome by grief over loss of sons. And she speaks to that. This is a Panchasata Patacara. And she says, whose way do you not know, either coming or going, that being you lament came from? Who knows where crying, my son? So they're lamenting and crying over the loss of sons. But where did they come from? But you do not grieve for him whose way you know, either coming or going. For such a nature living are living creatures. Unasked he came from there, unpermitted he went from here, surely having come from somewhere or other, having lived a few days. So it says that the students, truly she has plucked out my dart, hard to see, nestling in my heart, which grief for my son has thrust away for me, overcome by grief. So the story of Patacara is that she had lost her 2 sons, her husband, and her whole family all in a very short period of time. So that grief was so overwhelming, she went mad, and then she was wandering around the streets of her home village because she found out also that her whole family had been killed in a storm. So she found her way to the Buddha, and then the Buddha gave her a teaching, and then she attained Sotapanna. So that's her origin story. So we don't know if this was actually Kita Goswami's story. If you look in the Therigatha, it's very similar to that. But she did have a deep understanding of grief, and she had a lot of compassion for others, and she was an excellent teacher. So looking through these verses, we can kind of piece at least her monastic life together and get a sense of what kind of a teacher she was. So I could open this up for discussion and questions now.
Namayang Dhammakataya Sadhu Karang Dhamase
Sadhu, 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 anumodami. Thank you, Venerable, for sharing Dhamma on the wonderful Patacara Bhikkhuni. So good morning in the meanwhile to some other friends who have joined us. Cam, Angela, Edward, Celestino, and Michael. Good to see you. And Michael asks, or says actually, were it a choice between touching the mind or heart, I think the heart is far greater. I deeply appreciate your comments. And Jan says, thank you. So there are words of appreciation, but not any questions so far. Perhaps the live audience has comments, questions, ideas. Oh, looks like a lot of silence, both online and live. So maybe we can have an early morning if nothing comes up, which is also all right. Okay, I think that's maybe all for this morning. We can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you again this evening at 7:30 p.m. and tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. for another sutta study on the Therigatha.